Ladies and gentlemen, maybe some of you who are standing may want to take a seat. Firstly, can I just compliment you? In the work I do, no one ever stops when I get up to speak. They just talk louder, so it's terrific that that's happening. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Gonski, and I am the Chancellor of the University of New South Wales, which used to be further away than it is now, but we just put in our bridge 2 weeks ago, and when it's open, you'll be able to walk all the way from Anzac Parade up to here. It's a wonderful opportunity to be here today to celebrate, if we may, Professor Warwick L Morison, MD, and his beloved wife, Dr. Bronwyn Jones. And I want to welcome all of you here, and particularly family members who are here today. Before we proceed, I want to acknowledge the Bejigal people, who are the traditional owners of the land on which this hospital and the university stand. And I pay my respects on behalf of all of us to their elders, both past, present, and emerging. Ladies and gentlemen, there are two reasons I really wanted to be here today. Firstly, universities, and indeed medicine generally in this country, struggles every day to actually do what it needs to do, whether it's to educate or whether it's to research. And we should be exceedingly grateful to those who assist us, those benefactors, etc. And today we're here to celebrate somebody or some bodies who've done a wonderful thing. And so I wanted to be here for that. The second is a more personal one. I'll be telling you a little bit of the story, but I think the real story will come from the family. And it involves Prince Henry Hospital. And every time I think of Prince Henry, and there are a number of Prince Henry people here today, it just tugs at my heart, because that's why we came to Australia, and that's where my father used to lurk when he wasn't playing golf at the Coast Golf Club just down there at Prince Henry. So two wonderful reasons to be here. But we're here to pay enormous respect to a brilliant and respected dermatologist, Professor Morison. Some years ago, he asked his wife of 50 years, Bronwyn Jones, to establish a professorship in dermatology at the University of New South Wales. He wanted it in his name, and after his passing, Bronwyn followed his instructions, and we're very grateful to her for all the work she put in to making it happen. Warwick was a distinguished figure in the medical community. He was born in Sydney in 1941, and he attended medical school at the other place, Sydney University. I actually, when I read that, said to myself, I'm sorry, I've told you my punchline. I said to myself, why is the Chancellor bothering with someone who went to the wrong university? But those of you who know history will know that he went to medical school before we had a medical school. His wife, Bronwyn, on the other hand, being younger, went to the University of New South Wales Medical School, and indeed graduated in 1967, being in the first graduating class of that medical school. We're very proud to be associated with them. Their paths crossed, as I indicated a little earlier, when they were working at Prince Henry Hospital. She was a junior resident and Warwick was a registrar. They married in London in 1971 and made a lifelong commitment and partnership with each other. In 1975, both Warwick and Bronwyn joined the faculty of Harvard Medical School, and later they moved to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. There, Warwick became a professor of dermatology and Bronwyn became a professor of radiology. Pretty rare to have two Australians, both in wonderfully high positions in what could be said to be the medical place in the world. They always, however, never forgot home. And as an experienced Chancellor, let me tell you, a lot of people forget home, but they didn't. They remained affiliated with the UNSW teaching hospitals right through to the end. I want to publicly say that UNSW is extremely grateful to both of them, but also to the family generally. We're grateful for the far-sightedness and indeed generosity of the gift. Others will speak more particularly about them, but also more particularly about what will be done with the professorship and so on. And today you'll hear from colleagues, recipients, friends and family members of Warwick and Bronwyn who will share memories, and probably more reliable than the ones I've put, but just, I'm sure, equally remarkable as what these two have done. I want to thank once again all of you for joining us. It's a great privilege to be here, and I want it absolutely known that this professorship will ride high. We've got a wonderful person as the initial or inaugural person doing it, Linda, and basically it'll go from strength to strength. I'm going to hand over in a minute to somebody I've known for a long time, Dr. Peter Kaspari, a very well recognised and loved cardiologist, and then after, and he also, I should say, more importantly, a dear friend of Warwick. And then after Peter, we will hear from Professor Linda Martin, who is the inaugural recipient of the professorship, and she will talk more about what's being done in her field. After that, we're lucky enough to have members of the family here. His niece, Kim Morrison, will speak thereafter, and she'll be followed by family members Joanne Carson, Mark Provost, and Paul Provost. To all of you, thanks for coming, and Peter, you're on.
Chancellor and Professor Martin, my esteemed colleagues and friends and family members. Warwick and I have known each other for a long time. He's a Sydney University graduate, but we met as junior residents here at Prince Henry Hospital and spent many years together, and he met his wife at that time, and she came, I think Bronwyn was Warwick's junior resident when he was a registrar. And then after many years at Prince Henry Hospital, we went to London, where I got remarried and Warwick got remarried, and we spent several years in London together. And then Warwick went to America and I came back home to Sydney. And Warwick is a very esteemed, knowledgeable cardiologist. He and Bronwyn came back to Sydney on a yearly basis, and we caught up with them, and we had dinner together, and we exchanged our attitudes as we knew them. And Warwick is an outstanding dermatologist, was an outstanding dermatologist, was an outstanding person in research, and I know that much of his work will be mentioned later on by the new professor. And so I thank you very much for asking me to speak, and I'll hand over. Thank you.
Thank you and good afternoon. I want to start off by saying how deeply honoured I am to have been awarded the inaugural recipient of the Warwick L Morison Professorship in Dermatology, and the great opportunity that is really for dermatology in Australia. So I spoke to Bronwyn on one occasion on the telephone before I was awarded the professorship, and she made an enormous impression on me. The depth of her human warmth and kindness, and really her passion and dedication to education, but also her willingness to mentor. And at the end of our conversation, she asked me to please call her every 3 months so she could give me some motherly advice from her career as to what direction we should be focusing on. I then tried to call her and emailed her many, many times, and was very sorry to learn some months after her death that she had died alone. So I would like to, although today's event is in honour of Warwick, I would like to extend a special condolence to Bronwyn's family alone, and the deep tragedy of a woman who devoted her entire life to medicine to die alone is very sad. So I was so proud to be awarded this chair because of what it represents for Warwick and Bronwyn, which was really a very deep commitment to education and mentorship in medicine. I carry their memory with me every day, and in particular, I try to live up to honouring their memory. I see their memory every day. Warwick's name is in my email signature, and in all of the students whom I teach and supervise. Every time we publish something, Warwick's name comes up. And more recently, I've been very privileged to be in discussions with government about sun safety policy in Australia. And I think this is a real impact of the donation to be able to step forward and make an impact on a different area for photobiology to what Bromwick focused on in Baltimore, which is a little bit of a different climate, but nonetheless one that's incredibly important for Australia. So I'd like to say I'm immensely proud of what we have achieved to date, which would not have been possible without Warwick and Bronwyn's generosity, their belief and their passion of the importance of education and research. But we're here today as well to not only to celebrate their remarkable contribution, but also to honour their legacy. So I might go over Warwick's a little bit more about Warwick, although I feel like there are probably almost everyone here in this room knows more about Warwick than I do. Unfortunately, I was not able to meet him. He was born in Wollongong in 1941, studied medicine at the University of Sydney, was a junior doctor here at Prince of Wales and Prince Henry. He then studied internal medicine at St Mary's Hospital in London and completed his dermatology training at St John's Hospital of the Skin in London, where he completed his PhD in the immunopathogenesis and treatment of viral warts. He subsequently went to Harvard for 5 years and then was recruited to Johns Hopkins, where he remained for the rest of his career for over 30 years. Warwick's greatest contribution is in the field of photobiology. He was the founding member of the Photomedicine Society. He was editor-in-chief for 12 years of the main journal, Photodermatology, Photoimmunology, and Photomedicine, otherwise known as the 3 Ps. And there are 3 editions of his seminal textbook, Phototherapy and Photochemotherapy of the Skin. And in fact, I was doing some outreach work in Fiji with my colleague, Margot Whitfield, who's here, and we were with a dermatologist from Honolulu, who told me that he still proudly had an autographed copy of Warwick's textbook on the shelf in his rooms. And I did invite him to come today, but I'm afraid we weren't able to have any guests from Honolulu. He has countless book chapters and publications. What strikes me about his research is the breadth. So photobiology is a very broad area, and he looked at many photo-induced diseases, including drug-induced diseases, idiopathic photo disorders, which are less common in this country, and then really transferred the mechanisms of understanding of how light causes disease and it can be treated disease into patient care. And I think the way he transferred his knowledge of mechanisms of photobiology into patient care is very clearly seen by the number of patient testaments on his obituary website. And I know there are continuing patients that are continuing 3 years after his death to make a public note of his exceptional kindness and care as a physician. As well as an exceptional dermatologist, he's also well remembered for his quality mentorship, dedication to teaching, which he did mostly on a voluntary basis, and educating both trainees and colleagues. He was voted as the Consultant of the Year at Johns Hopkins for 4 years in 1990, 1998, 2002, and 2004. And in 2015 was awarded the American Dermatology Foundation Award for Extraordinary Talent as a Teacher. And so that brings us to why he then chose to make this incredible gift to the University of New South Wales. And his wife noted that it was because of the quality of the teaching and mentorship he had received as a junior doctor on this campus, and the beautiful Prince Henry Hospital, which sadly is no more, but what an opportunity cost for the world to replace that beautiful hospital with apartments. And so, I would like to say that I am deeply honoured by being the inaugural recipient of this award, but also aware of the great responsibility. I don't think we can understate the importance of the donation to dermatology in Australia. I never met Warwick, but I can only surmise that he went abroad because of the lack of academic opportunities in this country. And I don't want to be too political today, but dermatology is an incredibly important specialty in Australia, but in many ways is underfunded and under-respected. It's one of the most common causes of presentations in general practice. We, of course, are the skin cancer capital of the world with the most expensive, most common and most preventable cancer, but really we don't seem to be making very much impact. So I see this as a great responsibility to improve dermatology education, not just of our medical students. And I'm pleased to report, or not pleased to report, when I first started there were 3 hours of dermatology in the 6-year medical curriculum at UNSW. We have now more than doubled that, but we have a long way to go until we have adequate curriculum time to really reflect the commonness and importance of dermatology disease in our Australian community. And it's not just at UNSW. I think the work that we do in curriculum development will be important at all universities in the country, not to mention outreach teaching for general practitioners and upskilling. I would also, when I had the interview for this position, and I was aware that Warwick also donated the position here because he met his wife on this campus, I'd like to say that I said in my interview that I also met my husband on my first day at UNSW. And he's also now a professor here, so we are honoured to continue their legacy. So thank you very much for your attention, and to the family, my condolences, but my great gratitude for the generosity and the opportunity and impact this will have for dermatology as a profession in this country. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chancellor, faculty members, students, family and friends. My name is Kim Morison. I am Uncle Warwick's niece and Aunt Bronwyn's niece as well. And we're here today to celebrate his great life, his wonderful career and his generous legacy of Professor Warwick Morison as bestowed upon this university through his wife, my Aunt Bronwyn Jones. You've already heard today from the Chancellor regarding the importance of such a donation, from Dr. Kaspari, one of my uncle and aunt's closest friends and colleagues, and from the recipient of the Professorship in Dermatology, Dr. Linda Martin, and I again convey our congratulations for your appointment. I actually saw Dr. Martin on the news this week discussing the outcome of research on the incidence of melanomas and the use of sunscreen, which the results, it appears from those results, we're still far behind where we should be to prevent what is often a fatal disease, and one which the Morisons are very cognizant of, given our family history. Dermatology became a passion for my uncle, in particular the study of light and diseases caused and treated by light. Born in 1941, as you've heard, the youngest of the 3 children, you may say as an afterthought perhaps now, but as the saying goes, he was certainly the apple of my grandmother's eye. He attended local schools at Parramatta, and before the family moved to Harport, where he attended Manly Boys High. As was the custom at the time, Uncle Warwick underwent a number of vocational guidance evaluations. Not surprisingly, none of them focused on medicine, and he probably, influenced by his older brother, initially wanted to study pharmacy, followed by being a detective and journalism. My uncle did, however, choose to study medicine, I know, at that other university, graduating in 1963. When he commenced his studies, it was the only university, as we've heard, where medical studies could be undertaken in New South Wales. He then went on to undertake further postgraduate study at both the University of New South Wales teaching hospitals, Prince of Wales and Prince Henry. And of course, most importantly, he met his future wife of 50 years, Bronwyn Jones, when she was just a junior registrar at Prince Henry. She asked for his assistance with an IV, something, of course, you were not supposed to ask the medical registrar. All went well, and as my aunt's shift had ended, my uncle invited her for a cold beer, dispensed from a machine he had modified in the residence lounge. You just put in your coins and out popped a cold beer. They talked for hours, and this is where it all began, the start of a very close and wonderful relationship that allowed them both to explore their own ambitions and careers, but also meant they were there for each other through all aspects of their lives, enjoying so many things together throughout their long life relationship. Uncle Warwick decided his future was not in Australia, with a chosen path, he always said to me, in research and doctorate study. He left Australia, travelling by steamer to the UK and continued his dermatology and immunology studies at St Mary's Hospital Medical School. My aunt joined him in London and they married in 1971. He obtained his doctorate in medicine, sending a telegram, something we don't do nowadays, to his parents advising of his success. I mention that as it's so foreign. My aunt studied radiology at King's College Hospital, whilst my uncle was the dermatology registrar at St John's Hospital for Diseases of the Skin. After completing his doctorate studies, as he states in his journal, he was told to go west to the United States for better funding and where he was able to combine his clinical research with patient care. Both he and my aunt were on the faculty at Harvard and then at Johns Hopkins, as you've heard, where they both became professors and leaders in their areas of practice not only in the USA, but globally. Prior to taking up his role at Hopkins, my uncle undertook research with the National Cancer Institute in Frederick. I've always had a great sense of pride when I speak of my aunt and uncle, both such high achievers and amazing contributors, leading lights on so many levels in their chosen areas of expertise and profession, both choosing to not only teach but mentor others to become leaders in their respective fields. My uncle was a pioneer in dermatology and photodermatology, presiding for many years over the Photomedicine Society, where he was a founding member and instrumental in many of the areas of research undertaken, authoring and reviewing many works, including as editor-in-chief, as you've heard, of the Photomedicine Journal, the 3 Ps, as it was called, and receiving many awards recognising his extensive contribution to his area of specialisation. Perhaps one of the most interesting studies from my perspective was when he went to Egypt as part of his national cancer research and examined that very vexing question of nature versus nurture, studying patients who were, for the most part, covered throughout their lives, yet still presented with skin cancers and melanoma. In 1985, my uncle established a private practice in Baltimore, offering a comprehensive approach to the use of ultraviolet light and laser treatment for the treatment of various skin diseases. In 2009, Dr. Elizabeth Richards joined the practice and ultimately took it over following my uncle's retirement in 2015. Meanwhile, my aunt, Bronwyn, joined the Department of Radiology at Johns Hopkins. She established herself as an international leader in GI radiology and dysphagia science and served as the director of the world-renowned Hopkins Swallowing Centre. She became a full professor in 1990, being the first woman in her department to reach this level and only the 28th across the university at the time. She was also a founding member of her society, the Dysphagia Society, and the first woman to serve on the board of directors, a past president and recipient of the DRS Gold Medal in 2016. Like her beloved husband, she was also the editor-in-chief of the Dysphagia Journal. My uncle was a man of great spirit, subtle humour, high intelligence, always caring, attentive and very organised. Always ready to engage in discussion and challenge one's views on a variety of topics. He had a great love of cooking and wine, having been the president of the Food and Wine Society in Baltimore for a number of years. For me, he ignited my love of cooking and interest in wine. He gave me my first cookbook, which I still have today, the Robert Carrier cookbook, although it has unfortunately fallen apart with overuse. I used it to prepare my first dinner party as a very young girl, making my first beef Wellington, petit pâtés à provençal and a soufflé. Famous for their parties at Bolton Hill, and particularly for the Australian pavlova that my uncle introduced to his US friends and colleagues. It was his signature dish and his calling card for many dinner parties and celebrations. I greatly enjoyed also exploring his wine cellar at Bolton Hill and selecting a special bottle of red or white to consume with one of his wonderful meals. His collections of Penfolds wines is legendary. He also extended my appreciation of US wine, which I confess I had always thought to be far inferior to our Australian wines. I was very fortunate in my various roles over the years, as I often found myself in the US and Canada, and always made time to visit Baltimore as part of my travels, spending time at Bolton Hill, the Billabong, and the Shore. On one such visit, We actually purchased the picnic table on the way to lunch, which we had at the Gardens, one of the parcels of land that they purchased over the years, that had a marvellous view over the Chesapeake. Another passion which she shared with my aunt was travel, a bug I was also infected with. I was greatly inspired by their various adventures and would spend many hours viewing the slides with my uncle, which my uncle took of their travels, which he meticulously catalogued. In addition to their trip in Australia, which occurred nearly every year since moving to the US, when they would visit both sides of the family, the Morisons and the Joneses, together with their friends and colleagues. As well as exploring another part of this vast continent, they also travelled extensively for both work and pleasure. Each year they would choose a destination of focus, and over the years explored many parts of the globe, including the Galapagos Islands, a boat trip down the Amazon, a wings over Kenya safari, Sicily and Egypt, to name just a few. Their home at the shore displayed many of the treasures they acquired on their travels overseas. His other great passion was gardening, and equipped with his cork hat to ward off flies, he enjoyed spending time in their terraced backyard at Bolton Hill and the somewhat larger but wonderful garden over an acre at the shore. He would spend many hours tending the garden where he could name all of the flora. The property at the shore also offered many boating opportunities, and they had a pontoon boat moored at the jetty. The first part of the journey involved filling an esky with food and drinks, and for those who chose not to take the somewhat more challenging steps, there was a golf cart you could take to reach the jetty. We had many wonderful trips, exploring the eastern shore, lunching and imbibing a glass or two, whilst my aunt and uncle identified all of the local wildlife. Throughout my life, both my aunt and uncle inspired and encouraged me to continue to achieve and never be deterred. As in their lives, they leave us with a great legacy with the establishment of the dermatology professorship at this university and the radiology professorship at Johns Hopkins, continuing to influence, inspire and create opportunities for the future. Personally, I am forever grateful for the wonderful times I shared with my uncle that I will always have as cherished memories. Thank you for being here to celebrate his life and legacy.
Hi, I'm Joanne. I'm Joanne Carson. I'm a niece also of Warwick and Bronwyn. And today we're here to celebrate the Professorship of Dermatology for the University of New South Wales. And congratulations, Professor Linda Martin, on being the first recipient of this. I've got a few notes here. I was going through my memories regarding Warwick, and it's fitting that we're in this room. You know, this building's 1880s, and Prince Henry down the road was 1880s, and that, as we've heard, he met Bronwyn there, and down at Little Bay, not Lum Bay, Little Bay, and just started a loving partnership, which carried through their years. And my memories are also of the trips. They'd come and see us annually and look at photographs of where they'd been, and yes, Kenya or Galapagos Islands, weird and wonderful places, and also, just Amalfi Coast, things like that. It was just beautiful to get that snapshot. You felt you were just travelling with them. And also, they always stayed in Manly, on the beachfront, there at the Seabull, going there. And Warwick commented one day, because he was looking out at everyone was sunbaking outside and on the beach, and he said, he was just amazed that people were doing that. He just said, they're not sunbaking, they're frying themselves, But a dermatologist's dream, just watching it. And it was lovely, I saw them each year. I made a point, if I was working, I'd always make that point to have lunch with them, just have that connection, have a chat, with my either husband and on my own, and just hearing about their life back home, and they were, even though they were high achievers, they were very humble. They were quiet achievers too. It's only in hindsight that I see how much they have actually done. Last year, going back to the States to do the state with Kim here, and meeting some of their colleagues, and just and going to John Hopkins, seeing where she worked, Bronwyn worked, and where Warwick's practice, meeting Betsy, you know, I just didn't realise. I just didn't realise. And but it was their passion. They didn't have children. Medicine was their child. Simple as that. That's what they foremost was so important. Except for the cats. We've got to talk about Devil, Tiger, and Sasha finally. There's probably some in between, but they weren't fur babies. They were cats. They were special to them, and they just dedicated their life to medicine. It was what they ate, drink, you know, they breathed. It was really, really important to them. And I can see, you know, Warwick would have considered this is something he wanted. You know, he started down the road, but he wanted this legacy to continue. And being here, it does continue, you know, his legacy and for the future. And it's very interesting that Professor Martin's speciality is, I've got to say this properly, paediatrics. You know, that was, you know, for children, terminology for children. And apparently Bronwyn, when she started in medicine, her cousin's here today, said she wanted to be a paediatrician. You know, that's what it, so it's interesting, it's come sort of full circle with that. And what can I say? It's, I'm just really, really proud that they were my uncle and auntie. I really do. Really, you know, going to their house, especially last year when we were there, I stayed in the house. You know, I never got to go to the Billabong, but the 1760s house on the Sassafras River, you know, waking up in the morning, you know, the daffodils were out, which every year he planted, I'm not a gardener, so annuals, is it annuals? He planted each year those annuals, and they were blooming. There were eagles flying overhead, and there were deer in the garden, you know, and they were munching the daffodils, and he would not have been happy about that. And the colours, you know, the camellias and the azaleas, it was his other passion. It was just, and also, of course, his wine and food. He was really into that. It was very much so. And that showed when they came to Australia. They loved our oysters, you know. They never forgot Australia. The oysters can't get... Baltimore has good oysters, but our oysters were the best. And especially Bronwyn, always loved it. The different Kilpatrick and natural oysters. So I'm really grateful that people are here today. You know, it's a touching moment. You know, it's a touching moment to be here, to honour him. And I have to say, my mum, who was his elder sister, just died 1 month ago. And I told her about this event. I said, it's going to happen. And it's interesting, a month ago she was in hospital and the next day she died. And I know they're all together. Kim's father's passed last October. So the three of them together, and Brom, and, you know, their wives, you know, they're together, and we didn't get to have a funeral for them. So in a sense, this is, you know, this is saying, you know, thank you. Yeah, thank you for being my uncle and auntie. And thank you for passing on the legacy. And may, you know, your name will live on. Both of your names will live on. So thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Paul Provost. I'm just going to be talking really on behalf of Bronwyn, conveying the words really of my mother Faye, who was very close to Bronwyn, but I've known Bronwyn and Warwick all of my life, and it's always good to catch up with them. I'm just looking at those photos there. They're essentially a picture history of our get-togethers from the 70s through to the 2000s. So I'm just going to convey some words. Mum wanted to speak to today, but she's not really, you know, positioned to stand up for long these days. So I said that I would convey her thoughts. In 1944, Bronwyn Griffith Jones was born in Newcastle. Her parents, Harold and Molly Jones, lived in the suburb of New Lambton. My mother Faye, who was 3 at the time, when Bronwyn was born, also lived in New Lambton as well. Bronwyn's father Harold and Faye's mother my mum, her mother Beryl, they were brother and sister. Therefore, as cousins, they formed a close relationship growing up. Mum had two brothers. Bronwyn was an only child, so therefore they were more like sisters than cousins, not only in their close sort of proximity, but they inherited the Jones genes, so they also looked like sisters as well. Bronwyn's father, Harold, was a teacher of German and French languages at Newcastle Boys High, and when Bronwyn was in Year 5, he received an offer as a principal to go to Cessnock High School. So they packed up and off they went to Cessnock. So from then, every second Sunday, Faye's family, which consisted of her father Bill, her mother Beryl, and also her brother Barry and brother Ken, would travel to Cessnock and have a family lunch. Faye and Bronwyn would catch up on all the gossip, and they would often spend the afternoon around the pianola having a sing-along, the traditional way of entertaining yourself before TV and internet and other things to distract you. That pianola was still in the family. When Harold and Molly passed, Bronwyn happily gifted it to my brother Mark, who has it these days, so it's nice to know it's still there. After Bronwyn completed a HSC, which she excelled with honours, her father Harold was then offered a position as principal of Liverpool High School. So again, they packed up, moved to Sydney, and they settled in Condell Park, which became the family home. I remember travelling to Condell Park a lot for family occasions. Uncle Harold used to have an old Holden that he hung onto his cars for many, many years, way past their date. With Bronwyn's top marks through her HSC, she decided to study medicine, which has been mentioned, and she enrolled in the inaugural year at the University of New South Wales. At the completion of her studies, topping her final year, at that stage, she was planning on going into paediatrics, as Joanne mentioned, but along the way she did switch to radiology and also meeting Warwick as well. In 1962, at the age of 21, Faye married my father Barry, Provost. Bronwyn was the bridesmaid, and Mum still remembers her in her aqua dusted satin dress on the day. She was 18 at the time. Mum remembers the first time that her and Dad met Warwick, which was at a restaurant called Nefertiti, apparently, in Sydney CBD, and discovered that Warwick and Barry, my father, had the same birthday, 31st of March. So we often celebrated that birthday. Some of those photos actually, I see the cakes there, that was my father and Warwick celebrating the birthday when we would have the annual get-together. Not long after that, Warwick had made plans to travel to the UK, as has been mentioned, and Bronwyn followed close after, and they got married. After working there for a while, they then transferred over to America, firstly to Boston, then on to Baltimore, and progressed in their respective fields, which we're here to honour today. Every year, though, they would come back. I remember many conversations. They were never sort of pretentious or anything like that. They were always very down to earth. I think they liked the escape of coming back and just talking to family, catching up, and friends, catching up on the gossip and that sort of thing. They didn't really want to talk about what they'd been doing. They'd rather talk about, Warwick used to love to talk about wine. In a previous life, I was in the wine industry as well, and we used to have a lot of conversations about red wines and his Grange hermitages and so on. So, and the foreign wines that he was also, had tried and said they were wonderful, and if ever you get hold of a bottle, hang on to it, those sorts of things. But we have many, many great memories of them both, and it was upsetting when Warwick got sick and passed on. It was a complete shock when Bronwyn passed on very suddenly. However, they'd already set the plans for this wonderful sort of legacy to continue. So we're very, very proud of both of them, in what they've achieved in their lives, and to be part of the family that can come and speak and represent them from the family perspective. Just in finishing, I'd just like to convey Mum's actual words that she wrote down. She asked me to say a few things, so I'll just say that in her words. I'm so proud of you, my brilliant cousin. I miss you so much. I miss our phone conversations on birthdays and Christmases. I miss your visits back home and our catch-up lunches. You went way too soon. But what a legacy you and Warwick have left. I love you, my beautiful cousin, my little sister. You will always be in our hearts. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Mark Provost, son of Faye, brother of Paul. So I'm related to the Jones side of the family. Got the Jones forehead. So my grandmother was Harold's sister, so Harold was Bronwyn's father. So, it was a great shock to lose both Bronwyn and Warwick. We certainly held them in high esteem. The family held them in high esteem. There was a shot in the Newcastle Morning Herald, I think, back in 1968. So Bronwyn had just graduated from medical school. And it was of me. I think it was almost 3 years old, and it was announcing that Bronwyn had topped the year in the medical degree, and that she was going to study paediatrics. So I think paediatrics, I think it tore at the heartstrings a little bit. I think that's why she did switch to another line of medicine. But they used to come back to Australia, I think yearly, and the family would gather in the backyard of Harold and Molly Jones in Condell Park. And you can see some of the slides there, some of the very colourful, umbrellas, and the 70s was, full of colour. And we used to gather in the backyard there, and Bronwyn and Warwick would, Warwick would, he'd actually provide, I think he did the pavlova. He was also a great chocolate crackles maker, I remember. So, the Americans don't have the food that, they don't have Vegemite, they don't have pavlova, they don't have chocolate crackles, they don't have meat pies. But anyway, Warwick loved making chocolate crackles. And I remember back in the days when we used to go to the Condell Park, there'd always be a big plate of chocolate crackles. He loved them. And he even, back in the States, he loved making these chocolate crackles for his guests and bringing that bit of Australiana. He used to say that, well, I better go down to the supermarket and get a few more kilos of Kofa to take back with me, because you can't get it in the United States. So he'd always have a suitcase full of Kofa so he could cook his chocolate crackles. Look, I've got some very fond memories of them both. Warwick had a quiet way about him, but he was a great conversationalist. And Bronwyn always had this beaming smile. She was always happy, and she was always interested in what you were up to, what we were doing in our lives. We didn't see a lot of their professional. I mean, we didn't know a lot about their professional side. We're only learning now what sort of they've reached the top of their profession, and it's amazing what they've achieved, what they achieved in their life. When I got married 20 years ago, Bronwyn flew out from the United States to attend my wedding with my wife Wendy, and we had a fantastic night. And there was a few wines drunk, you know. And my father and uncle, you probably heard my father and uncle singing, because they actually were entertainers back in the 50s and 60s, and they wrote all the theme songs for the Leyland Brothers. So all of that music that theme song, those theme songs, that's Dad. That's my dad singing. Anyway, so they did the entertaining at the wedding, and then they did a rendition of Running Bear. And Bronwyn decided she wanted to get up and have the microphone. So she always had a sense of fun about it, and it was the most amazing rendition of Running Bear I've ever heard. So it made it a very memorable night, and so it's it'll stick there for a long time. I think Mum's always in contact with Bronwyn, by letter or by phone, and she was always interested in what was happening with the family and what was happening here. So I will miss them both, and it's a privilege to be able to participate in this event today. It's good to know that legacy will continue. And congratulations, Professor, on the professorship. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just make some closing remarks. Thank you to the family for those beautiful speeches, and I promise I won't honour Bronwyn by singing for you today. I think it's probably lucky that the cardiologist in the room didn't know about the kilos of Kofa going back in the suitcase. So I'd like to thank, especially and pay my tribute to friends and family. I'd like to thank the Chancellor, all of our medical colleagues. There are a large number of dermatologists associated with the hospital and the university who've made time to come today. I'd like to make special thanks to Joanne for digging through her garage and finding these beautiful photos, especially at this time, and to everyone who's helped with the organisation. So I now invite you to stay for some refreshments, and I look forward to meeting you all in person. Thank you.